Between 1969 and 1980, one man took advantage of sex workers, hitchhikers, and runaways in Florida, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey, killing 41 women. Or was it 88? Was he a serial killer or a serial confessor? Because despite his 41 murder confessions, he was brought to trial for just one homicide, a homicide that almost 20 years after his execution had DNA evidence proving he couldn't be the killer. There are dozens and dozens of dead girls and women, lots of confessions, and possibly some coercion. Short, pudgy, and wearing thick glasses, he called himself the Real Italian Stallion. This is Gerald Stano. I can't stand a bitchy chick. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Podorf. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Everybody.
Yes. Well, let me start over because I'm going to salute my California friends because I used to live out there. So you ready for the welcomes on the California side?
I'm afraid.
Yo, dude. What, welcome.
That's yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. Well,
I think that's Santa Monica.
That's Valley.
Right on the beach.
I used to live in Santa Clara, so it really didn't count, does it?
Yeah, the murder capital of the world. Isn't that what it says in, what's the vampire movie with the kids? The Lost Boys.
Is that what it is?
Isn't it? Don't they move to Santa Clara and it says it's the murder capital of the world?
Who knows?
I think I've actually done a case that was in Santa Clara, and we talked about the fact that it was the murder capital of the world in the 80s. And that's where you were living?
Yep.
A little ginger?
Yep.
Walking the streets openly and freely.
Yep.
It's a wonder.
Yep.
It's a wonder we found each other, baby.
In my 20s.
Well, wherever you're listening, whether you're on the beach in California or any place else, be sure to like, rate, and review the podcast. That helps other people to find us. Yep. We have gotten some funny emails about our cover art with the finger that people have to look more than once, and do a double take.
I have to brag on you because my wife is a marketing maven and she designed that thing.
I did.
It's great.
I'm good at giving people the finger, whichever one it is.
Exactly.
Especially when I'm driving.
Well, that's the good finger, though.
That is the good finger.
Yeah. We're allowed to use that one.
Somebody said in the In-Laws and Outlaws, that's Photoshop. And I want to say it wasn't Photoshop.
No. In fact, I'm gonna post a picture because I can actually do that.
Yeah, it was not Photoshop, but It was not my hand either. That photograph was taken in New York City by a hand model. Just kidding. But a professional photographer. I digress. I've really gotten off the subject.
Let's get back on it.
Yes. Okay, so if you want to see all those pictures and people talk about the fact that they think it's Photoshop, you need to join the Facebook group, the closed Facebook group, the In-Laws and Outlaws. Just go to Facebook and look for H2H or Hitch to Homicide, In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions. You're in such a fun group. We love them.
Yeah, they're great.
I'm going to jump right into this case. This is crazy.
Yeah, it sounds
this case is so crazy. And the more I looked into it, the more things came up. I'm sure I'm going to be leaving some stuff out, but I didn't want to do like a 17-part podcast, but it could probably be done on this case.
Yeah. Well, I'm interested in, in the murders and all that stuff, but the Real Italian Stallion?
He called himself the Real Italian Stallion.
I can't wait to hear this.
He thought himself quite the ladies' man.
All right.
Before I get started, let me thank some sources: the Daytona Beach News Journal, Murderpedia, Time Magazine, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Court TV's Crime Library, and...
Say it.
The Big Book of Serial Killers.
Yes, there it is. My favorite. My favorite.
Yeah, so we're coming up on the holidays, people.
All right.
These books are available on Amazon. They are quite the reading. They're very short snippets about different serial killers.
Good.
It's a great volume 1 and 2. Maybe he'll come up with volume 3 because there are always more serial killers out there.
All right, let's do it.
Gerald Eugene Stano was born Paul Zinniger on December 12th, 1951 in Schenectady, New York. I just like saying that, Schenectady. His mother had 4 other kids before him. She gave the previous 4 up for adoption, and she kept him until she had another child, a daughter who actually had brain damage. So she kept the little girl. She put him up for adoption. She had totally ignored him as a baby. When he's 13 months old, he's assessed by a group of doctors, social workers, and psychiatrists who said that he wasn't even fit for adoption because he had been so severely neglected.
Wow.
And all I could think of was, this had to be the 50s because now severely neglected babies are the ones that they want to get into homes for people to hold and cuddle. But this kid, let me tell you what, this poor baby, I read that he was functioning like an animal. He had been so severely neglected.
Okay.
He either played with his own feces. I also read that he was eating his own feces just to survive.
Wow.
Yeah. But 6 months later, at the age of 19 months, he is adopted by Eugene and Norma Stano, and they change his name from Paul to Gerald Eugene.
Okay.
So you would think, good, we got this guy in a loving home. Well, Gerald's parents are middle class. Norma's a social worker, and Eugene is a manager for a large corporation. And even though his parents are trying really hard to give him a loving home, Gerald had his problems. He wet the bed until he was 10, and during his adolescent years, he had a really hard time relating to other kids his age. I think he had a hard time relating to people, period.
Right.
The more I read about him, the more he did not relate to other humans well.
Okay.
He also stayed to himself, and when you're in your teens and you're a loner, you're going to get made fun of, and he was. He was a target for bullies at school, and even though he liked girls, these same girls were making fun of him. He was a compulsive liar, and he was a thief. He would steal from his parents.
Wow.
And in 1965, at the age of 14, he is arrested for pulling a fire alarm and for throwing rocks at cars from a highway bridge. So I read that he tossed this rock off a highway bridge. It hit somebody's windshield, caused a huge wreck. Nobody was hurt. But that's like...
Yeah, that's trouble right there.
Yeah. So he's acting out. He really is acting out.
Right.
At the age of 15, he's sent to military school by his parents. They're just trying to fix the problems. Maybe, he just needs more structure.
Right.
Well, it didn't end well because he started stealing from his schoolmates.
Jeez.
He moves with his family to Norristown, Pennsylvania in 1967. When he's 16 years old, he starts skipping school, and he's stealing money from his parents and his peers. He ran track, but he would pay the members of the track team to run slower so that he could win.
Wow.
He paid them with money that he stole from his parents. He's going to repeat 3 grades, and he's not going to actually graduate high school until he's 21.
Better late than never, right?
I mean, I'm glad that he stuck with it, but at the same time, it's like this kid really had issues.
Yeah, big time.
So in 1973, at the age of 21, he's got his high school diploma, and soon after, he enrolls in a computer school, Maxwell Institute in Pennsylvania. And he moved himself away from his parents and into a hotel, which I thought was weird.
That's very strange.
But I guess people did live in efficiencies in hotels, but this is 1973. It still felt weird and hinky to me.
Yeah. But I guess if you think about it, compared to what you would be paying for a lease, it's probably a lot cheaper.
It was 1973. What was it? $19 a month or something? I mean, I love to look at rent and the cost of houses and stuff in 1973.
Plus, he had housekeeping.
And he did have housekeeping. That's true.
I need more towels.
Well, he's very much into order.
Right.
And he's OCD about all of his stuff. So I could see where he wouldn't want housekeeping in his room.
So he's got a lot of issues.
He's got issues all over the place. As my friend John would say, issues all over the place.
Right.
But he graduates from the program and starts working at Chestnut Hill Hospital, but is soon fired because he's stealing from his coworkers, out of his female coworkers' purses.
Wow.
and he's going to move back in with his parents after moving from job to job. So he's going to steal from his parents when he can't be around coworkers to steal from.
Right.
I also read that he was chronically tardy to work as well. He takes a job at the University of Pennsylvania, lying about his experience to get the job. When he's found out, he lies again and eventually is let go. Then the hotel where he's living throws him out for stealing money from other guests' rooms.
Jeez.
He moves home. Then Gerald moves to New Jersey with his parents, and here he meets a mentally disabled girl named Yvonne, and they begin dating. Quote, "My relationships with women, I can say, was not exactly the best. It was good up north because you have a different type of girl. Down south, they think you got money to burn on them. Besides, I was very picky at my girlfriends. Like Yvonne, if the young lady is a respectful type, no running around, I will take her and treat her with respect. But if she's a trip, she won't get any respect from me." End quote.
Wow. Okay.
That's called foreshadowing.
Dun, dun, dun.
I was a little offended by that quote, by the way. You know, up north,
Yeah.
you have a different type of girl. Down south, they think you got money to burn on them. What? What is that? Come on, man. Come on.
Consider the source.
Yeah, okay. But I did. I read that quote and I was like, I'm slightly offended. Plenty of Southern girls making their own money.
Well,
Isn't that right, girls? Get an amen.
It's not like this guy's firing on all cylinders either. So.
Well, this is true, but still, I'm allowed to be offended.
You've earned it.
Thank you. But Gerald gets Yvonne pregnant, and Yvonne's father comes to him with a gun demanding that he pay for an abortion, to which he agrees. But after the abortion and his breakup with Yvonne, he begins to drink heavily and he begins to use drugs.
Well, that's going to help.
Then Gerald's parents want him to move to Ormond Beach, Florida with them so they could take care of his grandmother. So he moves to Florida where he takes more jobs, but of course he's stealing from his coworkers there too, and he's constantly getting hired and fired for insubordination and theft.
Is he a kleptomaniac?
Over and over and over again. No, he's not taking just for the act of taking. That's not the thrill. He wants the money, I think.
All
yeah.
All right. So he's just a criminal, a thief.
He's just a thief, and he's really disturbed. Now, why he went from stealing to homicide, I don't know. Well, maybe I do know, and we can discuss it along the way. But hang on to your britches, because there are a lot of dead women in this podcast.
Let me hitch up my britches here.
Hitch them up. But it's at this point that Gerald starts to kill. And here's his MO. He would pick up a hitchhiker or a sex worker, and he would immediately talk them up, hoping to strike up a fling. If the woman turned him down nicely, Gerald would drop it after a while. But if the woman was, quote, bitchy, end quote, it would enrage Gerald to the point of murder. If the woman laughed at him, this was cause for an even more brutal punishment, with Gerald punching and beating his victim to death.
Wow.
So this is an angry man. And when he's out looking for sex or whatever, if he doesn't get the respect he thinks he deserves, then all hell breaks loose.
Right.
March 21st, 1973, Anna Eugenia Arsenault, age 17, hometown, Silver Springs, Maryland.
Okay.
After graduating from high school a year early, she was taking some time to wander around the country. Her last stop was Gainesville, Florida. She and another young woman, Janine Ligatino, went out in the rain one night, March 21st, to buy cigarettes and beer. And Janine Ligatino, she's aged 19, and her hometown is Clintondale, New York. Now, Janine was one of the street people of Gainesville early in the 1970s, according to the police. She would briefly sell flowers on street corners for a sidewalk florist. Again, these two were hitchhiking in the rain to get cigarettes and beer.
Okay.
Anna was found stabbed to death near an abandoned lumber yard the next day. She left behind parents and a brother. Her mother said, quote, she was love, sunshine, joy, and cheer to all who met her, end quote. Janine was stabbed 13 times. Apparently, she first watched her friend Anna die and then fought to save her own life. Janine was a graduate of Highland High School. She was loved greatly by her parents, and she had 4 brothers.
Okay.
September 6th, 1973, 17-year-old Barbara Bauer, the daughter of Dr. and Mrs. Albert Bauer in New Smyrna Beach, Florida, disappears from a shopping trip. And I read in an old newspaper article where her father called her, quote, our little peanut, end quote, which I thought was very cute.
Yeah.
Barbara was an honor student in her senior year of high school. She disappeared when she went to Daytona Beach to purchase material to make a uniform for the high school drill team. And she did purchase the material at the fabric shop, but she never returned home. Barbara's car wouldn't start, and Gerald offered to help her. 3 weeks after her mysterious disappearance, the car Barbara was driving, a 1973 powder blue Plymouth Duster, was found abandoned in the parking lot of the Azalea City Motel in Valdosta, Georgia. And here's the problem. That car had been seen in that same location since September 6th, about 15 hours after Barbara disappeared. And 7 months later, her body will be found in a North Florida landfill 100 miles from home by a farmer. She's been beaten. And at first, when her parents go to identify the body, they look at her personal effects. And it was very inconclusive. They weren't able to say yes or no for sure if the jewelry and rings, including a friendship ring and a locket and one pierced earring, actually belonged to their daughter. But when they ran the dental records, they realized it was Barbara Bauer or Barbie or their little peanut. And Barbara had a twin brother. December 14th, 1973, Gerald murders 17-year-old Kathy Lee Scharf. Kathy was a local high school student in Port Orange, Florida. Gerald picked her up when she was hitchhiking on US 1, the highway that stretches along Florida's east coast. He stabbed her in the chest and left her body in a drainage ditch. 2 days later, her mother reports her missing to the police. Her body will be found on January 19th, 1974, about a month later, by hunters in the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge near Titusville in Brevard County.
Okay.
Her parents and her brother are absolutely devastated by this. By the age of 25 in 1975, Gerald stopped using drugs and stopped drinking, and he began dating a 22-year-old hairstylist named Teresa Esposito. And not long after they meet, they decide to get married. January 1975, Nancy Hurd, age 24, was a beachside motel maid. Nancy's marriage was coming apart at the seams, so Nancy moved to Daytona Beach for a fresh start. And she found a job as a waitress and a maid at a motel. And she left work one day to meet a friend at a nearby bar. Gerald Stano picked up Nancy on the road, and he strangled her.
Wow.
Quote, she started to sound like my future wife. Bitching,
Good
bitching,
Lord.
and I wasn't about to take it from anybody, end quote.
Wow, this guy has a hair trigger.
Yeah. Her body was found on January 3rd, 1975, north of Ormond Beach. Now, as Gerald's wedding date gets closer in June of 1975, a major hurdle appears on the horizon because Gerald was arrested on charges of forging a check from his employer.
Wow.
And the 3-month minimum jail sentence would mean that the couple's months of planning, reserving a church and a reception hall were going to be all for naught.
It's funny how crime will just, mess up your
Mess up your wedding plans.
Exactly.
And so Teresa writes to the circuit judge, his name is Judge J. Robert Durden, that this jail sentence is ruining the happiest day in a girl's life. Her wedding is on June 21st, right?
Okay.
And then Gerald's parents get involved as well, and the judge allows this to happen. He drops the 3-month mandatory jail sentence.
Jeez.
And on June 21st, these two get married. So her parents write to the judge. She pleads to the judge, and then his parents get involved. It's like, we're sorry, he's a criminal, and he's forged these checks, and he's been stealing from everybody. And oh, by the way, he's been murdering young women.
Yeah.
But please don't put him in jail because we're supposed to get married on June 21st. And they don't.
Yeah. Can you just ignore these minor little things that he's done?
I mean, come on, man. Yeah. So these two are married on June 21st. And Gerald's new father-in-law, Mario, gives him a job at his service station as a way to keep an eye on him while he's on probation.
Right.
But it doesn't take long for this marriage to get into trouble. I mean, none of us are surprised.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thunk it? The abuse will begin about 6 months after they say I do. These two will only be married for 13 months. Gerald would be physically abusive to her. He would hit her in the face, Gerald said his wife was lazy. She left laundry in the washer while she watched soap operas.
What a crime.
What a dick. Go do your own effing laundry, Gerald.
Yeah, exactly.
And Gerald is a self-confessed neat freak. Remember me telling you that he has OCD?
Right.
Yeah. He did not like her sloppy housekeeping. And Gerald was angry because after they got married, she never wanted to have sex except during the 1-week honeymoon that they shared. And I just want to say, well, if you are bitching at her about the clothes in the washing
laundry
machine, yeah, dude.
Yeah. Why do you think I empty the dishwasher?
Okay.
Just kidding. But I do.
Yes, he does. I read that while he was married, he would sometimes come home with blood on his clothes or blood in his car.
And she didn't ask him about it?
Well, I mean, he's hitting her. He's beating her for watching soap operas and
true.
leaving clothes in the washing machine.
True.
Yeah. By the end of his 25th year, Gerald was drinking a case of beer a week and 2 cases on the weekends. He was smoking weed and taking downers. And he was occasionally, quote, going downtown looking for a woman, end quote. He had a hard time keeping a job and worked as an inserter for a newspaper. Do you know what that is?
No.
That's the person who puts all the ads inside the folds of the newspaper.
Is that all that stuff I always throw away?
That's the stuff that everybody throws away except on Black Friday.
That's true. That's true. Black Friday, you save everything.
You save all of that because you know where the good deals are.
Yeah.
Right.
That's when you're sitting around after Thanksgiving dinner and you're
trying to digest your turkey, going through the leaflets. This is Rob. Who's got the cheapest, best TV on sale this year?
Yep. Yeah. It's got to be 50 inches or more.
But he worked as an inserter, and also he worked as a short order cook.
Okay.
May 15th, 1975, he meets 18-year-old Diana Lynn Valick. She's a hometown Tampa girl. Diana is a cocktail waitress at a Tampa bar called The Sportsman, and she routinely hitchhiked to work, which we know everybody did in the 70s. No one would do it today.
Right.
It was a bad idea then,
Yep.
but tons of people hitchhiked in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And on May 15th, 1975, she was last seen doing just that. And then she didn't come home. She'd been shot several times, and her body was dumped in a Pasco County orange grove. It was nearly 2 years before her body was identified.
Wow.
And Diana's estranged husband will be thought of as a suspect in the case until Gerald will confess to killing Diana. June 1975, Susan Basile, age 12, of Port Orange, Florida, got off the school bus one Tuesday, but she never made it through the front door of her home. Gerald will tell police he convinced the little girl to get in his car by offering to take her roller skating at a rink where they had met previously. So she knew who he was. She had met him before.
Right.
When he turned in the opposite direction of the roller rink, she became frightened. Gerald beat and strangled her. Her body has never been found.
Wow.
Susan had a brother and a sister. Her parents were devastated. She's 12 years old.
Sure.
Susan's mother once told a reporter that sometimes she met her daughter at the school bus stop, but not that day, not the day that she disappeared.
Wow.
And her body has never been found. The only reason they know that what happened to her is because of what Gerald tells them.
Gotcha.
Monday, July 21st, 1975, Linda Hamilton, age 16, is a student from Millbury, Massachusetts. She's in Daytona Beach visiting friends when she decided to take in a movie, and she goes alone. Gerald picked up Linda near an amusement park on the beach and suggested that the two of them have sex. Now, can you imagine? You're 16.
Maybe some chicken.
This guy, we're going to have some sex, maybe some chicken.
Anchorman, sorry.
Anchorman, there it is. There's your movie reference. But she's 16 years old, and this guy who's 25 or whatever, he's kind of pudgy. He's got his Coke bottle glasses. He does think he's the Italian Stallion. But he picks her up at this amusement park on the beach and then just suggests that they have sex. And she refused. Quote, I just put my arms around her, put my hands around her neck, and strangled her in the car, end quote. He buried her body in the sand near a turtle mound where it was found by a fisherman. Linda had 3 sisters and a brother and 2 loving parents. December 20th, 1975, 24-year-old Susan Bickrest is from Seven Hills, Ohio. After a Florida vacation, Susan decided to make the Sunshine State her home. Well, nothing against Ohio, but those Ohio winters
Right.
in December of 1975, I would want to be in Florida too instead of Ohio.
Yeah, and that wasn't, 1978 was when we had the big blizzard.
Well, we had that in Kentucky too.
Yeah. We were in the epicenter. So in 75, they didn't even know what was coming to hit them.
True.
Anyway, I digress.
Susan had worked as a beautician in Ohio, but she had to wait 6 months to qualify for her license in Florida. Meanwhile, she was working as a cocktail waitress in Daytona Beach. 5 days before Christmas, 2 fishermen find her floating face down in a creek. She had 2 loving parents and a brother. Quote, "It's something you read about in the newspapers, but you never understand it until it happens to you."
Right.
End quote. That's what her brother said.
Wow.
February 10th, 1976. Can you see this? It's just like every month, about every 6 weeks, there's a dead body. February 10th, 1976, 34-year-old Bonnie Hughes of Dundee, Florida. She was trying to save her marriage. In the end, she couldn't even save her own life.
Right.
Her estranged husband came to discuss a reconciliation one night, but Bonnie had already left for the grocery store. And the next day, her body and her new tan Cadillac she was driving are found by a lake in Polk County. Bonnie had been beaten and strangled to death. March 29th, 1976, 22-year-old Rosemarie Oliver was from Kennett, Missouri. Somebody email me. She was working as a fruit picker for a citrus company in Central Florida. Her body and her blue suitcase were found in a Polk County orange grove. So this is the second time, or possibly the third, he's left a body in an orange grove.
Okay.
Polk's sheriff's detectives said she had an extensive police record of petty offenses in Missouri and that she had, quote, a history of hitchhiking. So more than likely that's what she was doing, was hitchhiking when he picked her up.
Okay.
June 15th, 1976, 19-year-old Ramona Neal is from Forest Park, Georgia. She's in Daytona Beach with friends celebrating her graduation from high school. She went to see her boyfriend at another motel that afternoon, but they argued and she left. And Gerald picked her up along the beach. Quote, "She started to get sort of an edgy side," end quote, Stano said. So he killed her and left her body in a marsh at Tomoka State Park.
This guy's just out of control.
It doesn't take much for him. So he picks up these women, asks for sex or demands it, and depending on what they say back to him, he kills them.
Right.
August 21st, 1976, 21-year-old Enid Marie Branch has been studying refrigeration repair at a technical school in Tampa. Her family lost touch with her a few weeks before. She was last seen alive as she left a Tampa restaurant at 4 o'clock in the morning on August 20th. This is according to police. She was beaten and shot to death, and her body was left by a deserted road. Enid had a son who was adopted by her mother and stepfather. She also had a sister, 2 stepsisters, and a stepbrother. September 26, 1977, 18-year-old Joan Gail Foster left Memphis, Tennessee, and came to Tampa, Florida looking for work. She found a job dancing nude at a Tampa bar. 4 days after she started work, she asked for a night off because she was having trouble with her car. She accepted a ride from Gerald that night. Her body was found 2 days later in a Pasco County orange grove west of I-75 with 2 bullets in her head.
Wow.
So this is a serial killer. He's killing these women in different ways.
Right.
He strangles them, he stabs them and beats them, or he beats them and strangles them, or he just flat out shoots them.
Yeah.
And there's such a disconnect. There's really because most serial killers, it's always the same thing every single time. Well, he's picking them up in the same way. He's asking for the same things, but he's murdering them in different ways.
Yeah, and he's just looking at them as objects, not human beings.
Well, just objects to fulfill his wants and desires or needs.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
20-year-old Molly Newell, I also saw her listed as Kay. She moved from Indiana with her husband to Tampa, Florida, but her marriage failed. Katie was divorced with 2 kids and no job. She had recently been arrested on a sex worker charge. Her body was found in a swamp at the west end of the Gandy Bridge in St. Petersburg, Florida. She had been shot in the head. So again, another shooting in the head.
Right.
October 10th, 1977, 38-year-old Emily Ellen Greavy Ellen had been seriously hurt in a car wreck, but she was on the road to recovery. She moved to Tampa from Pompano Beach, Florida, where her two sisters were living, and started a new job as a motel desk clerk at the Interchange Motor Lodge. Her first day on the job, she even made a dinner date with a young man she'd met, Gerald Stano. Emily's body was found by a hunter on October 21st in rural Pasco County off State Road 54. Emily had a son, 2 loving parents, 2 brothers, and 5 sisters. A later investigation will say that Emily also dabbled in sex work.
Okay.
October 27th, 1977, the carburetor on 23-year-old Phoebe Winston's car wasn't working. She drove a 1964 Falcon, and the car had been giving her trouble. That afternoon, the engine died, and Gerald Stano offered her a lift. Then he shot her in the head. Phoebe's body is left in a field near Lakeland, Florida, and won't be found for another 18 months when a land surveyor accidentally kicks her skull.
It's almost like he's just trying to rack up numbers.
I just don't think he cares.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knows or cares, but this is interesting, so just wait. After he confesses to everything, it gets even more interesting.
All right.
November 12th, 1977, 23-year-old Mary Kathleen Muldoon is in her 3rd semester of woodworking classes at a Daytona Beach community college. She was working at a bar to pay her bills while she went to school. Her landlord and her teacher described her as quiet and hardworking. Her rented room contained a desk and a chest of drawers that she actually made by hand. Gerald gave her a ride to a restaurant that evening. Her body was found in a drainage ditch in New Smyrna Beach. She had been beaten and shot. And the information I could find about Katie Muldoon was that she was an orphan who moved from Pennsylvania to Florida. So this is a 23-year-old, self-supporting young woman who's, getting her life together and going to school.
Right.
And it's all gone because of Gerald.
Because of the Italian Stallion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
August 5th, 1978, 34-year-old Sandra DeBose was blind when she was born. According to her mother, she was sexually molested when she was a young girl. She spent much of her life in psychiatric hospitals and had been released to her mother's care. And although surgeons had partially restored her vision, she was starting to go blind again. She also had a drinking problem, according to her mother. The day before her 35th birthday, Sandra was at a beachside bar. Her body was later found beside a drainage ditch. She had been shot in the head. Sandra had a son who was raised by her mother. So he's picking up on these women, some of them who are sex workers, some of them are just hitchhikers, and then some people are just, I always use the term the weak impala of the herd, but that's who they go after.
Yeah.
Then we have 2 Jane Does. Jane Doe 1 is about 20 years old. Gerald said he picked up this young woman outside a bar in Daytona Beach and offered to pay her for sex. He drove her to a wooded area and the median strip of I-95, but they argued over money, and Gerald strangled her. Gerald says he carried her into the woods. Police have been unable to identify her body. Jane Doe number 2 is the woman that Gerald says was hitchhiking near Tampa when he offered her a ride. He killed her and dumped her body near Lido High School in northeast Tampa. Her skeleton was found in 1982. So if you're keeping score, victim number 22 is 17-year-old Christine Goodson. After Christine's mother died, she was raised by her grandmother, and the teenager was a handful. She dropped out of high school and was put into a juvenile detention home more than once. On the night of April 14th, 1979, she left home on her new 10-speed bicycle. The next day, her body was found floating near the St. Petersburg Marina. December 10th, 1979, 17-year-old Dorothy Williams is a high school dropout. Her mother told police that Dorothy was a sex worker. An acquaintance said that a man gave Dorothy a ride to a motel one evening. It was Gerald. Her body was found in a drainage ditch behind another Tampa motel. She had been beaten and stabbed several times in the chest. January 9th, 1980, 20-year-old Mary Carol Mayer goes missing. She's a junior college student and a champion swimmer. Her mother dropped her off at the Holiday Inn Boardwalk on North Atlantic Avenue, which is part of Daytona Beach's entertainment area. The lounge at the top of the hotel was a popular place for young people to go. Mary Carol was supposed to get a ride with a girlfriend when she was ready to leave, and if she couldn't, she would call her mom to come back and pick her up. Mary Carol was at the bar for a while talking to her friends. She was a very pretty blonde, very tan, very toned swimmer's body. But her friends never showed up at the Daytona Beach bar, and she started walking away from the bar, and Gerald offered her a ride. He drove her over the Seabreeze Bridge and then out Mason Avenue. He wanted to stop at Fanny Farkle's, but she didn't want to. Fanny Farkle's is a popular, amusement type place with street food and games to play.
Okay.
Gerald asked Mary Carroll for sex, and when she said no, he wasn't happy about it. Gerald admitted to taking a knife from beneath the seat and plunging it into her chest as they drove in Daytona Beach.
Wow.
But he's driving and stabbing her at the same time.
Gee whiz.
She was found stabbed to death the next day on January 10th, 1980. Her body is found posed, lying on her back and covered with branches. 26-year-old Tony Van Haddix had previous arrests from sex work. On February 15th, 1980, Gerald picks Tony up outside of a 7-Eleven store. He offered her money for sex, and she agrees. When she asks for money after the sex, Gerald said he reached instead for a knife he had hidden beneath the front seat of his car. Her body will be found on April 6, 1980, by a 12-year-old boy in a lot on Primrose Lane. So let's talk about this car for a second.
Okay.
Gerald drove a 1977 red Gremlin. The Italian Stallion's driving a Gremlin.
Oh, my gosh.
And the front license tag read, quote, "No riders except blondes, brunettes, and redheads," end quote.
He's a wild and crazy guy.
This guy. Ugh.
Gee whiz.
So here we go. Here starts his downfall. Donna Marie Hensley. Gerald picks her up in his car asking if she's working that night. She says no, but then he offers her a ride. Then he asks how much for sex, and she tells him $20. They go to the hotel where Donna turns her tricks. They have sex, and then after, Gerald loses his mind and shouts, quote, "I hate hookers. They're the scum of the earth," end quote. And she notices that he is now wearing gloves. He moves toward her, and he shoves her to the floor, saying, quote, "You're gonna get it now," end quote.
Wow.
He begins to stab her. The cut is deep enough for stitches, and she's bleeding. He manages to stab her 5 or 6 times in the right thigh. He was using a can opener and a knife.
Wow.
And he tells her, quote, "I'm taking my money back. This was a ripoff," end quote. He's still panting, and he rifles through her purse. He takes the $20 bill that he gave to her, and he takes an extra $30 that she had tucked inside her purse. And then he says, quote, "I'm not through with you yet," end quote. Donna struggles to her feet. She runs out the back door of the motel room. Her screams attract the attention of other people in the hotel. It was almost 5 in the morning when she runs out of the door. And on the morning of March 25th, 1980, Donna Hensley walks into the Daytona Beach police station and asks to speak with an officer. And Detective Jim Gadberry escorted this young woman into his office and takes her statement. She said that she'd been walking along Atlantic Avenue when a man in a red Gremlin with tinted windows pulled up. The two quickly agreed on a price, and she directed him to her motel room. And once there, the man refused to pay up front, and the two began to argue. The man produced a knife and sliced her in the right thigh. Afterwards, he berated her for prostituting herself, and she fled the scene. The wound was deep, and the young woman had to visit a local emergency room and get 27 stitches. So
Wow.
Donna had to go get 27 stitches.
That's a cut.
She was really angry about the attack and made it clear that she wanted the man arrested for assault. She was adamant that she would recognize him if she ever saw him again, and described him as being of average height, slightly overweight. He wore Coke bottle glasses and had a mustache. And she was also certain that on her way to the police station, she had just seen the man's car parked at a local apartment building. She saw the red Gremlin.
Well, you forgot to add, too, that she said, and in no way did he look like an Italian stallion.
He did not look like an Italian stallion. But did you notice Gerald said they had sex, and
Right.
she said that. But when she gave her statement to the
Well, of
police,
course.
she did not have sex with this man.
Yeah. We were just friends.
Donna, you're a smart woman.
Yep.
After taking Donna's statement, Detective Gadberry drove to the apartment complex that she mentioned in her statement. He was unable to spot the man's car, but less than a mile away, he spots the red 1977 Gremlin that appeared to match her description, and he wrote down the car's plate, and he returned to the office.
Yeah, that car's pretty difficult not to spot.
I mean, okay, so I watched Riding in Cars with Comedians Getting Coffee. I think that's what it's called, with Jerry Seinfeld. If you haven't watched
Great show.
It's so good. And I think it's Jon Stewart. He picks Jon Stewart up in a lime green Gremlin because that's what Jon Stewart drove as a kid. And I didn't realize this because Jerry Seinfeld always goes through like what's under the hood and how it works and everything. And the most distinguishing thing about a gremlin is, I think it's on the gas cap. Mm-hmm. There's actually a little gremlin.
Oh, really? I didn't know
There's like a little guy on there. And that he even said, this is the best part about this car.
Yeah, my high school buddy, Nick, he had a purple gremlin when we were in high school.
A purple gremlin.
Exactly.
I love that.
Yep.
Well, Detective Gadberry gets back to the office. He goes back to the police HQ. He runs the plates. And he discovers that the vehicle is registered to Gerald Eugene Stano, a 28-year-old man from Ormond Beach. And the detective looks over his records, and he noticed the man has this really long rap sheet, but he'd never been convicted of anything. He was also a prime suspect in several other assaults on local sex workers. Gadberry printed out a copy of the suspect's mugshot, and he takes it to Donna, and she says, "Yep, that's him. That's the guy who assaulted me." She signs an affidavit charging him with aggravated assault and battery. And the detective goes to the restaurant where Gerald is a short-order cook. They go back to the kitchen, and Detective Gadberry says, "Hey, I got a warrant for your arrest for aggravated assault." And Gerald says, quote, "Man, I don't even know what you're talking about. I don't even know that broad," end quote.
He's not. Let's dig that hole a little deeper.
Yeah, I don't even know that broad. I don't even think they showed him a picture.
Wow.
I don't even know that broad. April 1st, 1980, Gadberry and Paul Crow bring Gerald in for questioning relating to the attack on Donna Marie Hensley. And during this interrogation, Gerald confessed to assaulting the sex worker. And before the interrogation began, Crow fed Gadberry certain questions to which he already knew the answers. He wanted to see how Gerald reacted. He wanted to see if he was telling the truth and when he was lying. And here's what Detective Crow soon discovered, was that whenever Gerald was telling the truth, he would lean forward in his chair. And when Gerald was lying, he would lean back in his chair. And after an hour of relentless questioning, Gerald finally confessed to the assault on the sex worker, Donna. Then Paul Crow takes over. He's sitting directly across from Gerald, and he said, quote, "Gerald, I'm Detective Sergeant Paul Crow. I got a problem that I think you might be able to help me with. I've got a missing girl who disappeared. I just wondered if you'd seen her." And then Detective Crow produces a photo of Mary Carol Mayer. She's the girl who was the swimmer.
Okay.
He places it on the table. Gerald studies the photo for a couple minutes and says, quote, "Yeah, I've seen her before," end quote. And then he went on to describe seeing her at a local hotel the previous month. And when Crow asked him if he approached the girl, Gerald leaned back and said he gave her a ride to Atlantic Avenue and he had not seen her since then. So he's leaning back. He's lying.
Yep.
And Crow knows that Gerald's lying, and he decides to change the subject. And he says, quote, "Gerald, what are you upset about?" End quote. And Gerald leaned forward and looked directly into Detective Crow's eyes and said, quote, "Today's my gotcha day. Today's the day my parents adopted me." End quote. And Gerald began to talk about his childhood, about his relationship with his parents. And after a while, Detective Crow brought the subject back around to Mary Carroll. Gerald changed his earlier statement about dropping her off on Atlantic Avenue and said that he drove her around for a while and eventually stopped at a local supermarket to purchase beer. Quote, "She just sat in the car while you got some beers?" "Yeah." "Are you sure you didn't try to get into her pants, Gerald?" "Yeah." "You wanted to get a little bit, and she didn't. Is that right?" "Yeah, it.
Yeah.
She didn't want to give it to you." "No, she didn't. She could be pretty hard, couldn't she, Gerald?" "You're right, she could."
Wow.
"So what did you do? Did you hit her? You got pretty mad at her, didn't you?" "Right, I did. I got so mad, I stabbed her as hard as I could."
Whoa.
Quote, "Tell me how you stabbed her." Well, I carry this knife under the seat, so I pulled it out and I just hit her as hard as I could. What did you do then, Gerald? I stabbed her several times in the chest. She opened the door and tried to get out, but I cut her on the leg and pulled her back in. I shut the door. She fell forward and hit her head against the dashboard and started gurgling. I stabbed her a couple more times in the back because she was messing up my car.
Jeez.
She just went limp, so I took her. I can't stand a bitchy chick.
Wow.
End quote.
Wow.
And then Detective Crow says, don't tell me anymore. Let's go to the car. You'll direct me. I'll drive. Because he wants to see, where are other bodies? What else do you have?
Right.
Now, after he confesses to the murder of Mary Carroll Mayer, he says that he posed her body, he laid her on her back, and he covered her with branches. Which is exactly how she was found.
Right.
He signs a confession to her murder. He's charged with first-degree murder, and he's put in jail. April 15th, 1980, Toni Van Haddock's body is found near Daytona Beach. She's been stabbed multiple times in the head. Gerald confesses to her murder. She's the one he picked up outside 7-Eleven and offered sex for money. That's the last one he picks up and murders before he picks up Donna, and she runs out the hotel room door.
Gotcha.
In 1981, Gerald takes a plea deal and pleads guilty to 3 murders: Mary Carroll Mayer, Toni Van Haddock's, and Nancy Hurd. And the terms of his confession were that the other cases would be read in court and he would receive 3 consecutive life terms. September 2nd, 1981, Judge S. James Foxman agreed to the plea. The judge commented that he was reluctantly agreeing to the plea and thought that Gerald deserved the death penalty. 1982, while he's in Florida State Prison, he becomes angry. Gerald gets angry because he didn't receive enough attention for his murders and his confessions.
What?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so he confesses to more. Kathy Lee Scarf, Susan Bickrist, Katie Muldoon, Janine Ligatino, Ann Arsenault, Barbara Bauer, a Jane Doe, Bonnie Hughes, Diana Valek, Enid Branch, Christine Goodson, Phoebe Winston, Gail Foster, Susan Basile, Sandra DeBose, and Dorothy Williams.
Wow.
June 8th, 1983, he pleads guilty to Susan Bickrist and Katie Muldoon deaths. He waived his right to a trial, and the same judge as before sentenced him to death. September 1983, he's convicted of Kathy Lee Scarf's murder. He's given the death penalty by the jury. He confesses to more victims over the next 3 years, but it's not known if they're all true or not, or if they're just ones that he's heard of, and no further charges are filed.
Okay.
On May 22nd, 1986, the death warrant of Gerald Stano is signed. He appeals. July 1986, he's granted a stay of execution. Then on June 4th, 1987, his second death warrant is signed. He appeals again, but his execution date is set for August 26th, 1987. Now, we talk a lot about people who are on death row. Florida does not mess around.
Right.
They just don't mess around. On August 22nd, 1987, 35-year-old Gerald Stano files for a writ of habeas corpus. He's claiming ineffective counsel. He's granted a stay of execution, but he's going to lose his appeal. And while all of this is going on, Gerald is living on death row in Florida with Ted Bundy.
Oh, wow.
These two are roomies until January 24th, 1989, when Ted dies in the electric chair.
Wow. There's a bad pair.
Yeah, right?
Gee whiz. Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall with those conversations?
Yeah. 2 crazies in the same room. Well,
Wow.
And one thinking he's the Italian Stallion, and the other, the women on the outside, thinking he's, hot.
Yeah, exactly.
10 years later, in 1997, 45-year-old Gerald Stano receives his 3rd death warrant signed by the governor of Florida. A date is set for his execution, April 29th, 1997. But then on March 20th, 1997, he filed a 3rd appeal, again relating to his counsel, and his execution is pushed back to May 30th, 1997. Now, before his execution, the electric chair malfunctions during the execution of Pedro Media.
Okay.
And by malfunction, I mean that old Sparky, which is what they call the electric chair in Florida, it malfunctioned and a 12-inch flame leapt from the killer's head.
Oh, I heard about this, yeah.
And courts had to stay his execution until issues concerning old Sparky were resolved.
Yeah.
So it's like we want to kill them in the electric chair, but we want to kill them humanely.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do that in an electric chair.
Yeah. Yeah.
1 month before his execution, he wrote to a friend saying, quote, "I'll get by this date like the ones before. There's no need to worry. There's no way they'll execute me," end quote. March 23rd, 1998. A year later, at the age of 46, Gerald Stano was sent to his death by the electric chair. For his final meal, Gerald requested Delmonico steak, baked potato, sour cream, and bacon bits, tossed salad with blue cheese dressing, lima beans, a half-gallon of mint chocolate chip ice cream, and 2 liters of Pepsi.
You know, I could go with everything except the lima beans. Just
Rob
saying.
would have peas instead.
Yeah, give me some peas, not lima beans.
Now, although he confessed to 41 murders, his final statement proclaimed innocence and directed blame for his false confessions at the lead investigator, Paul Crowe.
Oh, gee.
Quote, "I'm innocent. I am frightened. I was threatened, and I was held month after month without any real legal representation. I confess to crimes I did not commit," end quote. Now, there's been a lot of controversy over Gerald's guilt or whether he was what was called a serial confessor. Was he a serial killer or a serial confessor? I think he was both.
Yeah.
Some believe he was fed details about the crimes, so his confessions seemed more legitimate. And to further enhance his argument, in 2007, a lab report from the FBI concluded that the pubic hairs found on the body of Kathy Lee Scarf did not belong to Gerald. So this evidence will be destroyed after his death.
Okay.
And controversies long accompanied Gerald's criminal history, with some believing that he was actually a serial confessor, including his arresting officer, Detective James Gadberry, who challenged the decision to accept Gerald's first confession as valid, and in 1986 signed a legal affidavit stating unequivocally that Sergeant Paul Crowe was responsible for, quote, spoon-feeding, end quote, Gerald the intimate details of unsolved homicides.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Now, according to Gadberry's affidavit, Gerald merely parroted the information back to Crowe, while other veteran homicide officers later made statements to that effect that they too had witnessed Paul Crowe, quote, helping, end quote, Gerald to confess to crimes that he hadn't committed. And Paul Crowe's colleagues recalled how he actively gathered information on unsolved or cold case murders from foreign jurisdictions, and during sworn testimony in Orlando Federal Appeals Court in 1993, Crowe himself recalled enlisting the help of a local reporter, Kathy Kelly, testifying that she used the newspaper's archives to locate details about murders to which Gerald later confessed, including the murder for which Gerald was later executed.
Wow.
So I think he did kill some of these women.
Right.
And I think he deserved to die for sure. But the one that he got executed for, I don't think he killed her.
Because, I mean, he admitted, you know, the one girl where he was stabbing her in the chest as he was driving along.
Right.
I mean, he had all those details. Did they spoon feed him those details? I mean, come on.
Well, no, they didn't spoon feed him every detail, but I think they spoon fed him the information on 17-year-old Kathy Lee Scarf, who was murdered in December of 1973.
Okay.
But he did confess to murdering Mary Carol Mayer, and when he was asked to describe her, he stood up and gave her height, her weight, described her as being tall and athletic. His description of her was absolutely perfect. And on further questioning, Gerald gave a correct description of the clothes that Mary Carol was wearing. And when Detective Crowe said that Mary Carol was wearing slacks and a shirt, Gerald corrected him and identified her as wearing a white shirt with animal designs and jeans.
Yeah, that's pretty specific.
Yeah, and he was able to describe exactly how he murdered her, including stabbing her in the chest, thigh, and back. And all of that was correct.
Right.
His description of the wounds matched the autopsy report, except that stab wounds in her back had not been included in the medical report. And Gerald stated that he had stabbed the victim in the chest as hard as he could, and the autopsy reflected that her sternum had been broken. And he could describe the road where he traveled with her body and how he wrapped her in foam padding and how he left the body in an area near the airport, placing palm branches over it.
Right.
So he knew, and he did. He killed her.
Right. And you can't change a leopard's spots. So you know that
right.
that wasn't the only one that he did.
Right. I want to talk about the murder of Tony Van Haddix, too. Tony had been listed as a missing person from Daytona Beach, Florida, and around April 6, 1980, her body was found in Volusia County in an area where Gerald used to live and which was near the residence of Gerald's brother. I didn't even realize that he had a brother until I found that research because all you hear about is just him.
Right.
At the scene where the portions of the body had been found, detectives found that there were similarities between the murder of Tony and the murder of Mary Carroll, particularly the fact that branches of a small tree had been used to cover the bodies in both victims.
Right.
And Gerald knew details concerning Tony, things that the police didn't know. For instance, when Crow asked Gerald if he knew something about Tony, which the police would not know, Gerald stated that Tony had a cast on her arm. And when Crow asked Gerald if it was a sling cast, Gerald reported that it was an arm cast and not a sling cast. Now, I do not doubt that he murdered. He was known for picking up sex workers and girls who were walking down the road and girls who had car trouble. But do I believe that he murdered all of these women? No.
Yeah.
I don't believe he murdered all these women. Do I believe that he murdered at least some of these women? Absolutely.
Right. Yep.
Absolutely. But that is the story of Gerald Stano, who can't stand a bitchy chick. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitch to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com, and thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Well, it sounds like the Italian Stallion was actually an Italian failure. The thing that upsets me the most is I love the Rocky movies, and, you know, Rocky's the Italian Stallion. So,
Yo, Adrian!
Yeah, so this guy's ruining it for me.
Adrian.
Thanks a lot, dude.
That was my best impression.
Yeah, it was good.
Thanks.
All right, well, this one, the Bless Your Heart that we're going to do today is close to my heart. So
it's close to the Bless Your Heart is close to your heart.
It is. So let's do a little Bless Your Heart.
Well, bless your heart.
So the headline of this, because I used to work for Paramount Parks, and we had the Hanna-Barbera license. So the title of this is Flintstone Wannabe Tries to Stop Car with Feet. Isn't that awesome? A Fred Flintstone wannabe has been busted for trying to use his feet to brake his pickup on a busy highway.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. According to Roseville Police Deputy Chief James Berlin, it was a case of, quote, this is the best too, moronic decision-making. I think that's an understatement, actually. According to the Detroit News, the man rolled about 2 miles on Groesbeck Highway while sticking his feet outside his truck in an attempt to stop it, hitting 4 vehicles along the way. I would have given anything to see that.
So he had to open the door.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
He was unable to stop the truck at a red light and hit 2 vehicles, Berlin said. But instead of learning his lesson, he carried on driving and hit 2 more at another intersection.
I'd be so mad. I would be so mad.
The driver was finally stopped when an officer caught up with him and told him to put his truck in park. Deputy Berlin was quoted as saying, "I just can't believe anyone would think for a second that they could make it home using their feet as a brake."
How do you stop a pickup truck, of all things?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe a Yugo.
Or a gremlin.
I don't know. I couldn't even stop the Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
I have a little Mini Cooper.
Yeah. After passing field sobriety test.
Oh, they thought he was drunk.
Yeah, it was discovered he was driving with a suspended license.
Oh, go figure.
Yeah, you think. The man received a citation for reckless driving and driving with a suspended license. Quote, "It's so stupid, it's comical," said Deputy Berlin. But it could have been very tragic. Thankfully, no one was hurt. There is a video, and we'll post it on the In-Laws and Outlaws.
Oh, there's video.
Oh, yeah. We got it going on here.
You know, I knew two people growing up who the floorboard had rusted out in their car. Because back in the day, you drove what you got.
Oh,
You drove what people gave you.
Yeah.
There was the Jolly Red, which was a truck, and you could see the road going underneath it. And then my good friend Robin, they had this brown car. She called it the brown turd. I hate that word. But you could see the road underneath it. And it was like, we're going to have to Fred Flintstone this bitch.
Yeah, my first car was a 1969 Ford GT Torino, and it had more rust than metal on it.
But it wasn't a gremlin.
No, it wasn't a gremlin. But the greatest thing about it was that the front seat, it was a bench seat, and there were some bearings out or something on it. But every time you stop, the right passenger side would go forward. And it was awesome on a date because you'd hit the brakes.
Oh my gosh, that's not awesome.
No, it was, because then she'd get all worried and like move close to you. It is what it is.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or a Fred Flintstone story or a bad date story, you can email me at chris@hitchtohomicide.com. I don't read them. I just pass them on. You can also use the pull-down menu where you can also suggest a case.
Yep.
That's all we have for today. That's my wonderful husband over there.
And that's my beautiful bride on that side.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.
That seat thing would never work on me. Never.
It was effective.
Whatever.